Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. What has a short, bald, paunchy, round, Greek-American accountant from Flatbush, Brooklyn, what does that guy have in common with Earl Morrall, Larry Zonka, and Nick Buonaconti? Well, that's what this story is about. My client, Vinny, grew up in Flatbush, where his father owned a luncheonette. Vinny worked in the business from the bottom up and learned everything about the business and everything about the business of the business. Besides serving the food, everything about the financial aspect of the business, which drew him into going to school to become an accountant. And he became such a competent accountant that he was known as a guy who could solve any financial problem, any accounting problem. You could put him in a room. All he needed was some coffee, some cigarettes, some paper, and a pencil, and the problem. And Vinny would emerge 2 or 3 days later in his underwear with the solution and think nothing of it. He was that good. And that ability eventually landed him as the box office accountant for the Mets, the New York baseball team, and the New York Jets at Shea Stadium at that time. Vinny also bought Wally's Restaurant on 48th Street, just east of 8th Avenue in the theater district. Wally's was originally established by Wally. I don't know his full name. I don't remember his full name, but he was the maitre d' at the famous steakhouse, The Palm, for years and years and years, and he built up a very big clientele. And when he left the Palm, he wanted to open his own place, and he opened Wally's, and he ran that very successfully for years, and Vinny bought it from him. The Palm was a great restaurant, and Wally's was not as famous, but famous in a quiet way. They never ran an ad. The place was packed every night. They served Italian food and steaks, and it was the home of all the Broadway show people. The movers and shakers on Broadway, the producers, the people who owned the theaters, everybody and anybody who was in that business ate at Wally's on a regular basis. The place was spotless. The food was terrific. The service was extraordinarily good. Everybody there was a pro. And that's the way Vinny ran the place. That was the place where the deals would be made to finance the Broadway shows. Broadway shows are a complicated proposition in that some people want their name above the marquee as their show. Other people want to be silent partners, don't want anybody to know that they're backing a show or anything else, and they just want to quietly go about their business and everything in between. And Vinny was the guy that would structure all of these deals. The producers and all of their backers would come there and sit down at a table with Vinny if there was a complicated deal, and Vinny would get out a napkin or any piece of paper that was handy and a pencil or a pen and structure a deal, and they were done right there. And he became also the dean of the Box Office Guild. He was the head of the Box Office Guild, which was the association, sort of like the union, of all the box office people from all the theaters and all the arenas and everything else that was in New York that sold tickets on a big basis. And once a month, they would meet at Wally's. They had an upstairs catering hall, a small catering hall, and everybody would meet up there. And Vinny was the undisputed leader of that group. He was the guiding light for the whole group. He was highly, highly respected in that place. As a result, Vinny got a job eventually with the Miami Dolphins. And Joe Robbie, the box office was a mess. It had been leaking money and tickets and everything else for years and years. And it was run by one of the big, I think they call them, I don't know if they call them, one of the big four accounting offices, firms that everybody knows. I don't know which one. I don't want to name them and fault them in this story, but they weren't doing a great job, and Joe Robbie was dissatisfied. He brought Vinny in, and in 3 years, Vinny straightened out the entire situation. And as a result, Joe Robbie gave him, when they won the championship, the Super Bowl. Vinny was an accountant with the Super Bowl ring. He got a Super Bowl ring, and there he was. And that's what he has in common with Earl Morrall and Larry Zonka and Nick Buonaconti and the rest of the guys. But he became eventually. Joe Robbie offered Vinny a piece of the team if he would become chief financial officer to Miami Dolphins. And he was near retirement at the time, and he didn't want the responsibility. He says, no, it's a great offer. I would like it and everything else, but I'm honored. But I can't take on that responsibility. I'm ready to retire, and he didn't want to do that. Before that, he had also risen to the position of vice president of Jude Jameson Theaters. Jude Jameson Theaters is a combination of three names: Jules, James, and Cynthia. They were the grandchildren of the man who owned Jude Jameson, who was the principal, the CEO, the owner of the 3M company that made Scotch tape, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. Vinny was the vice president of Jude Jameson Theaters. So he had a long career, and he had a lot of responsibility, and he brought his son into the business, into the Wally's, and named it Wally's and Joseph's, and put his son in charge of it. He was looking to get out of all of these things. And along the way, Wally was still the active owner of Wally's. He had asked me to help him out in a criminal case. He had a dishwasher who was being charged in Brooklyn for stabbing two people. And he said the guy was the most dependable guy. He's a Mexican, a little diminutive guy, a Mexican guy, a Mexican national. He was an immigrant. And he said the guy was good as gold, and he worked there for 20 years, and he was totally dependable and a hardworking guy. And he said, could I help this guy out? He said he had asked one of his clients, one of the customers in a restaurant, who's a big shot lawyer, Barry Slotnick, a very famous guy who's got a memoir out and everything else. And he's a very competent guy. And Barry quoted him very high price, to defend this guy. And then Vinny went to me, his brand X, and he said, can you help me out with this guy? And I said, sure, no problem. I had helped Vinny out before with other problems. We sold the air rights to Wally's, and he was one of the second or third building in New York City to sell their air rights, and I had helped him with that. So we had a nice relationship. And turns out I helped the Mexican guy. He was charged with these assaults in Brooklyn, and I got him acquitted when the truth came out. The fact is that these two guys who he had stabbed had mugged him 3 times before. When he would come home late from work, early in the morning, they mugged him for whatever money he had, and he just got fed up with it, and he started carrying a knife. And the 4th time they tried to mug him, he just stabbed the 2 of them. So that was a pretty sympathetic story, and they kind of got what they deserved. And I managed to talk the DA out of indicting him, and Vinny was very happy with all of that. So I went to Vinny for some advice because I had been writing musical lyrics, and I was thinking of doing a Broadway show with the guy who wrote the music, my musical partner. And Vinny sat me down and gave me a very Dutch uncle type speech. He said, you want to write a Broadway show? I said, I have a good idea. And I told him what it was. He says, yes, that's a good idea, but let me tell you how this works. He says, you want to do a Broadway show? He says, and this was in the 80s. He said, you're going to need $10-15 million to produce the show. You have to raise that money. And you have all these crazy people that want to be backers and everything else, and some good, some bad, some indifferent, he said. But they're very difficult. Then he said, you have to go and you have to hire a costume designer, a lighting designer, a sound designer, a choreographer, a band leader, everything else. And all these people want to do, they have one thing and one thing only on their mind. They want to win a Tony Award, and they want to win it at your expense. And money is no object. As long as it's your money, they'll spend anything they can, get their hands on to win that Tony Award, and you're paying for it. He says, now the show could develop for years. You have to go on the road, you change it 15 times. It's an aggravating process, he said. And you think this is good, and then you can't do it, and then somebody gets sick or somebody dies. He says, it's an ordeal. He says, it's terrible. Now, notwithstanding all of that, you finally get to where the show is going to premiere on Broadway. You go through all the previews and everything else, and now it's the opening night, and the show goes on. And that night, the New York Times critic is having a bad time with his lover, whoever his wife, boyfriend, whoever it is, and he says, and he writes a scathing review. poof, $15 million down the drain because the critic from the New York Times had a bad night. And that's the Broadway business. You're a good lawyer. Don't do Broadway, he said. You're too smart for that. Stay away from this business and never do that. So Vinny went on. He went on to retire, and he went down to Florida. And there he was, happy going to the racetrack at Hialeah and all the different racetracks in Florida. And he spent a very, very happy retirement. His son sold the restaurant eventually, made a fortune because the real estate was a prime location, made a lot of money. And it was a happy ending. And it brings to mind, Earl Morrall and Larry Zonka and Nick Buonaconti, all of them fabulous NFL stars and Hall of Fame players, etc. And they got rings. But Vinny not only got a ring, Vinny got an offer for a piece of the team, which he was a lot more valuable to Joe Robbie than all of those guys put together. And that's the moral of the story. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.